All right, good morning. How are we doing today? Tired. I think it's the weather. It's gloomy outside. All right, so today we'll be going over reviewing in your bell ringer food webs, but we'll dive into some more ecology notes today. You'll do a brief activity before we get started over abiotic and biotic factors of an environment, and then we'll hopefully get to species interaction practice today. If we don't, then we'll keep that for tomorrow, okay? Grades are due today for me at 12 o'clock. So if you completed something and you just forgot to submit it last week, make sure you get that into me so you can get credit for that, and it'll be reflected on your progress report, all right? Any questions? No? Okay. All right. So bell ringer, so using the food web below, okay? Let's identify our producer. Who's our producer? Our grass, good. All right, what about our primary consumers? There's more than one. Okay? All right, so now say who? The deer, okay? Because they're doing what? Yeah, they're consuming the producer, okay? Who is the secondary, or who are our secondary consumers? So if our mouse and our deer are our primary, who's our secondary? We got a couple of them. Okay, so we have our hawk, our fox, and say it again. It's like a cougar. Yeah. All right. So yes, our cougar, our wolf, and our hawk. Okay. All right. And then we have our tertiary. So who's our tertiary? If we're looking at the food chain with the wolf and the mouse, the cougar. Okay. Any other tertiary? The eagle. Good. The eagle could potentially be one as well. All right. So remember, when you're identifying the primary consumer, secondary consumer, or tertiary, or if we have a fourth, our quaternary, just make sure you're following the directions of the arrows. Okay. The arrows will tell you exactly who is being consumed, what's being consumed, and what's next in that energy process. All right. Any questions with that? Good deal. Keep your notebook out. Don't take it. Don't put it up. All right. So just revisiting our standard for this week. Or this unit, should I say, is SB5. So remembering that we're going to hit majority, all of these bullet points in terms of how all organisms interact with each other and the things around them, okay? Today, our essential questions and objectives, we're focusing on, again, those abiotic and biotic factors, habitat versus niche, and then also how species are interacting with each other in each ecosystem, okay? So you'll be able to tell me the difference between habitat and niche, the difference between abiotic and biotic factors, and then again, how do those species interact, okay? So quickly, it's right where you took your bell ringer, all right, I want you to look at this list of different parts of an environment. So you have some abiotic factors and you have some biotic factors. Given what we know about biotic and abiotic, all right, what does abiotic mean? The non-living parts of an environment, okay, or an ecosystem, or biome, okay? And then biotic are considered what? Our living things, okay? So I'll give you about 2 minutes to briefly just distinguish between those words where each one falls in. Is it an abiotic factor or is it a biotic factor? Okay? So create like a T-chart and list each one. Alright, briefly, okay, before transitioning back to our back tables for our intro, activity. What will be classified clouds? Abiotic, good, abiotic. What about rain? Good, oxygen. Abiotic, good. What about people? Biotic, good. What about our leaf? Biotic, good. So even if, okay, our leaf falls off that tree, it's no longer attached to that, the body of the tree, okay, what gives it life. Is it still considered a biotic? Yes, okay, because biotics factors are living things and also once living things, right? What about a tree cut down? Still biotic, good. All right, what about raccoon? Temperature. Abiotic, salamander. Ice. Abiotic, good. What about volcanoes? Abiotic, good. Let's do a couple more. Maple tree. Biotic, moon. Good. Earthworm. Good. Good job. Any questions with the difference between abiotic and biotic factors? Okay, because you're about to do a brief activity with it. All right, good. All right, so what we're gonna do now, okay, on the back tables, prior to us getting into our lesson today, there are 8 different sheets. 8 different sheets, okay? They have a specific biome listed on each sheet, okay? So you have from rainforest, you have tundra, taiga, all right, desert, and so forth. Okay, we got a couple different biomes back there, and we'll talk a little bit about biomes today. Your activity, okay, is for you to list all the abiotic and biotic factors that you and your group can think of in relation to those specific biomes. Okay, you can take your Chromebook back there as well. All right, just in case you kind of get stuck. Some of the environments, some of the biomes are going to have similar abiotic and biotic factors, but some of them are not. Some of them are going to have different organisms, and we'll talk about how organisms adapt to specific locations and what's that considered, all right, in relation to what they eat, what they consume, what they need to survive, okay? Any questions? All right, so Ray, Leah, Ren, and Stormy, you all can move to this first table. Y'all can pick between grassland and tiger. Yeah, that's usually Leah. No, y'all go to one though. Y'all do that grassland? All right, cool, good. All right, rain, do rain, Annabelle. Kaylee, Tyler, and y'all can move. Alright, y'all can move to, yeah, that's fine, you can do that. Alright, let's do Noah. Yeah, let's do Noah. TJ, Tristan, y'all can do Tyler. Alright, let me do you 3, you get on this side of the table. Alright, you can either be swamp, and I think that is Savannah. So you do swamp or Savannah. Alright, and then you 3 can do, let's put y'all on rainforest on the other side. Alright, so let me split this group up, because it's too many of y'all in there. Alright, 2 of y'all come back on tiger.
No, they were separate. You didn't tell us which one goes to, you just said for me.
Oh, I told y'all to go with that group, because y'all always supposed to be in one group. So y'all on tiger? Okay, then y'all can do desert group. Alright, Maddie, Anna, and Rain, y'all do desert together. Alright, cool. Alright, so the first thing, alright, you got your specific biome, okay? So for that biome, I want you to list, you don't have to draw, if you wanna draw, that's fine. List all the things before looking on your Chromebook. I want you to list all the things that you can think of in terms of abiotic and biotic. All the living and non-living things of your specific biome. Okay, so you can look up the tiger. Yeah, somewhat, yeah. So the tiger, look up the environment of a tiger. Okay, Rain, you gotta be, you're working with Maddie and Karen. So you can give them your ideas, not write them down, you can give them your ideas. And yeah, make sure y'all including, Rain.
That's cute.
Alright, so the list needs to probably be in the middle so everybody can see. Okay, cool. So y'all got grasshopper, grasshopper, what else?
Air. Yeah.
And y'all can look up, you can look up grassland and see some other.
Where's the water?
You think moss?
Oh, it's not frozen.
Mammal, pirate dogs. And mammal. Yes.
You read the paper.
So what do you consider a
Air.
I'm not stupid.
Everybody should have air.
Yeah.
Yeah, oxygen.
See,
Oxygen, air, oxygen. Everybody should have that one.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you about 2 more minutes. Okay, once I give you 2 more minutes,
Look at that.
you're gonna return back to your seat. You're gonna leave your sheet at your seat, because you gotta come back to it, in the middle of our, lesson today.
I'm sick of Reagan. We've gotta get one more.
I didn't write very.
C. Yeah.
Is that right, Sloan? Yeah. Where?
There's some grass in there. Probably. Wait, grass is living. Oh. It's not dead yet.
Rocks, river, solid, lake.
Eagle. Eagle.
Alright, 30-second picture. Quietly return back to your seat. Leave your sheets there.
So good, you guys.
Not right now. In a second. Alright, open your Chromebooks up. We're gonna transition into our notes for today. And if you wanna take them on paper, that's fine. There are guided notes. Make sure you have guided notes. It's posted on your- Yes. Alright, so again, you were able to list, okay, even if you're kind of unfamiliar with some of those biomes, it's okay. We'll dig into some of those biomes later on this week. But the objective was for you to be able to identify specifically to your biome, okay? Because there are specific biotic and abiotic factors in each biome that you saw back there, okay? So we'll visit some of those, or the reason for why you did that activity later on today, all right? So we know that ecology is the study of how organisms interact with each other, and then also their environment. Okay, you know that's just the basic definition of what ecology is. Here, probably, yeah. What? Where your phone book? Phone? Okay. All right, again, how organisms interact with other organisms, and then also how organisms and interact with their surroundings. Okay, that is what ecology is. Okay, you don't have to write down all of it because as it's in your notes online, so if you don't want to write down, just make sure you abbreviate it to your understanding. Okay, that's fine. Remember to bring the wrong book. Alright, so levels of organization, you probably already saw this, okay, in middle school, or revisit it, okay? Levels of organisms, starting with organism, okay, one individual thing. So we are organisms, one individual person, one individual thing. A group of us in one specific area, or living in one specific area, is considered a population. Okay? A group of different populations in one specific area will be considered a community. Okay, so when you think about the levels of organization, you're going to consider at each level, almost like when we talked about those food chains and food webs, how everything begins with producers, right? With our levels of organization, everything has to begin with an organism, okay? And it builds upon that organism. So a group of organisms is considered a population, and then a group of populations, okay, are considered community, a specific community. I'll come back to it. Okay? An ecosystem is then considered what? A community, and how those abiotic factors can affect them. Our biomes, which is the activity that you did earlier, are large geographical areas with similar climates and organisms that adapted to live there. Okay, so again, a biome has each biome has their specific organisms and specific climates, specifically to those organisms and how they adapt there. And then we have the entire full picture, our world, our Earth, which is considered our biosphere. Our biosphere is different parts of our Earth where life is in existence. And you sit up for me, please. You go ahead and go to the restaurant. Alright, quick check. What would this illustration be considered? It wouldn't be a biosphere because it's not displaying our entire world, okay? Would it be do we see a bunch of individuals here? Yeah, okay. What about populations? Do we see different groups of species here?
Yeah.
Yes, so we have our giraffes, we see some zebras, some tigers, right, some lions, some elephants, okay, some deer, all right. What about community? Would this be considered a community? populations of species in one area, okay? So community, okay? And how they're interacting with those abiotic factors. Okay, what about, what's after community? What did we say is after community? So we have our populations, we have our communities, and a bunch of communities equals a what? An ecosystem, okay? So this will be considerably, probably a specific biome, okay, that has all of these organisms here. What biome would this kind of be considered? A safari. Okay, it could be a safari. Good. All right, so our abiotic and biotic factors, again, reminder, our abiotic factors are all the non-living parts of an environment. So examples would be our water, soil, air, temperature, light, pH levels. Okay, so on all of your sheets back there, you all should have had, definitely should have had some sort of water source. Okay, there's always some water source, even in the desert. Even though it's limited, there's water. Okay, soil should have been on your sheet. Okay, air. Okay, every biome has air or oxygen, whichever order you put. Temperature. Okay, whether it's cold, whether it's hot. Okay, temperature should have been on your sheet. Okay, light, a light source. Okay, that should have been on your sheet. Sunlight, some sort of light. Okay, pH should have been on your sheet. Okay, so those are all things that could have been or should have been listed. Okay, biotic are all the living or once living organism in an environment. Okay, for some of you, you put birds. Okay, for deserts, you could have put cactuses, could have put lizards, snakes. Okay, what other organisms live in a desert? Got camels, got scorpions, good. Okay, in our rainforest, some of our biotic factors that we listed were trees, leaf frogs, fish, alligators, snakes. Okay, y'all have chimpanzee, gorillas, and rainforest. Maybe not rainforest. Okay, insects, yes, mosquitoes, flies, good. It's a good job. All right, a rabbit, what would that be considered? Biotic. What about water temperature? What would that be considered? Abiotic or biotic? Abiotic, good. What about wind? Abiotic. What about our tree? Biotic. And mushroom? Biotic, good. Good deal. I'm gonna briefly talk about interactions, habitat versus niche. It's one of our objectives for today and also I can statements. Okay, so a habitat is the biotic and abiotic, so non-living and living things, in the place where an organism lives. So an example would be soil, because that's the habitat of the earthworm. And that's where the earthworm lives. So yes, you have your rainforest, which is the biome, but within that biome, within that rainforest, each living thing has a specific habitat that they have, whether that's in the soil, whether that's in a cave, whether that's in the trees. And then we have our niche. Our niche is the job. So it's the appointed role for that specific organism in an ecosystem. So examples would be what an organism eats. Okay, obviously that has to be a role because we have to have our food chain, we have to have our food webs, and how how they consume their food and get their energy source, how it gets its food. So is it hunting its food, or is the food being self-generated? How it interacts with other organisms. So how is a bird interacting with a snake? Okay, how is a bird interacting with another bird? An example, the loosening and enriching of the soil. Okay, that is the niche of an earthworm. So the purpose of that soil, okay, or the purpose of the earthworm, should I say, is the loosening and enrichment of that soil. So that's its job. Okay, so think of a habitat as where that specific organism or species lives, and then a niche as how it lives within that habitat. Deal. All right, quick check. So a woodpecker in a nest would be considered its what? So the woodpecker being in the nest, what is that? A habitat or a niche? A habitat, good. What about the spider spinning its web? A niche, good. What about a tiger stalking its prey? That's how it eats, right? So that would be considered its what? Niche, good. What about a rabbit in a burrow? It's habitat, okay? What about a penguin swimming and hunting for fish? It's niche, good. Okay, and what about an alligator in a swamp? Habitat. Good. Any questions with the difference between habitat and niche? So our habitat is where the organism where? Lives, right? And how it interacts with species around itself, right? Whether it's the abiotic or biotic factors. And what's the niche?
So when they go.
Yeah, so it's specific role or specific job within that ecosystem. Good. So how it eats. Okay, competition. Okay, briefly talk about competition, and then you're gonna do a second part to your activity. So competition is how these organisms or how these species interact in relation to the resources they need. So that's food source, a water source, okay? And then we know that they need these resources at the same time. Okay, so they need this food at the same time. They need that water source at the same time. Okay, so how they're in competition. All right, example, grass and dandelions. Okay, so we got a flower and we have grass, two producers. They compete for nutrients and water. And they're in the same environment, in the same soil, okay? They're competing for those nutrients and water. We got two different types of competition. So we have our interspecific, so right here you see our beaver and our bird fighting over an acorn. So it's the competition between two different types of species. So they're not the same. So an example would be not a beaver, a groundhog and a bird fighting for an acorn. Two different species, but they need the same resource. They need the same food. So they're fighting each other for it. They're in competition for it. What happens if that resource becomes becomes limited. So that specific resource that they need becomes limited. What happens? What do y'all think will happen? Say it again? Okay, they'll start fighting for it, but what happens to those specific, yeah, the population will decrease. Okay, the population decrease, or the more dominating species, okay, would take, more dominance and eventually either cause the other species to move away to find another location, or again, that population will eventually become extinct. Okay, another competition, what we call intraspecific. So that's the competition between members of the same species. So an example would be deer competing for a mate. Okay, what also can affect the resources? So if we're talking about deer, what can affect that mating, that competition for mating? Or who can affect that? Humans, okay? When we go deer hunting, right? And we kill off some of those species, we kill off some of those deer. Okay, we could be taking away their mating partners. Okay, making it very difficult for them to reproduce, to recreate. Okay, competition exclusion. It means when two species competing for the same resource cannot coexist in the same area. So what happens is one species will be better suited for the niche, so for that specific job or role in that environment, and will outcompete the other. Okay, and then the other species will either be forced to another niche or they will go extinct. So just like we talked, when resource becomes limited, okay, that better suited species, all right, will outcompete the other. And again, force that species to either move to another niche, so another role, okay, or again, they'll eventually die off and become extinct. All right, so one, is that inter, or is that the, exclusion? So it's number one, inter, intra, or exclusion. So we see one species competing with the same species. So what's that one? Intra-specific. So we got one bird, the yellow bird, competing with each other for that specific resource. All right. The two, we have what? A red bird and a yellow bird competing for the same resource. What is that called? Interspecific. Okay, two different species, but technically the same species for two different families. All right, and then we have three, where one is evidently dominating, which is the red bird, which is called what? Yes, so competitive exclusion. So eventually, the yellow birds are going to either die off or they're going to have to find another niche. Okay, any questions with that? All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to move back to your stations for the last few minutes of class, and I want you to tell me I want you to pick three of those biotic factors. So 3 organisms from your specific biome, and I want you to tell me their habitat and their niche to that specific biome. Okay, so where do they reside? Where do they live in that biome? And then what is their role? Okay, what is their role? I also want you to tell me one interaction. So one interaction between 2 of your species. about worms. What about worms? In the soil. Okay, so that's their habitat. Now tell me what their roles are. So the worms, I already gave you that one. Theirs is for enriching that soil. Okay, loosening and enriching that soil.
Not only eats plants. No, bro.
You know that fish's role is to what? What is a fish role? Okay, make sure your name is on your paper. Okay, make sure we'll review our ICANN and objectives tomorrow. Okay, being able to differentiate. So right now you're differentiating the difference between a habitat and its niche. Again, the habitat is where the organism resides, lives, and the niche is its job. Okay? Along with those abiotic and biotic factors are non-living and living parts of an environment. Once the bell rings, you are dismissed. Make sure your name is on your paper. Your group member name is on the paper. Leave the paper at the desk for me.